Today I want to read you a story about the Beeman. It's written by Laurie Krebs and illustrated by Valeria Cis. This time of year you will start seeing a lot of bees out working. Bees. There wouldn't be sunflowers, wouldn't be peas, wouldn't be apples on apple trees if it weren't for fuzzy old buzzy old bees dusting pollen from off their knees, by Eileen Fisher. The Beeman. Here is my grandpa, who is known in our town as the Beeman. Here is his jacket with zippered up hood that covers his face just the way that it should when he visits his hives as the Beeman. Here are his gloves made of cotton and leather, protecting his hands in all kinds of weather when he tends to his hives as the Beeman. Here is the beehive where all the bees sleep, tucked into a box called a shallow or deep, and then placed on a stand by the Beeman. Here is the smoker that quiets the bees and a hive tool that opens the beehive with ease for a much closer look by the Beeman. Here is the queen bee who does her job well and lays tiny eggs in a six-sided cell. She's the heart of the hive, says the Beeman. Here are the drone bees with big bulging eyes and a large appetite supporting their size. They mate with the queen, adds the Beeman. Here are the workers, 10,000 or more, who gather the nectar to bring back and store in honeycomb cells for the Beeman. Here are the house bees with swift-moving wings that dry up the nectar a worker bee brings, making honey for me and the Beeman. Here's the extractor, its clickety-clack, removing the honey from frames on its rack and filling up jars for the Beeman. Here's some of the honey returned to the hive. It's food for the bees to help them survive the long winter days near the Beeman. Here are the bees protected from harm inside the hive, huddled cozy and warm. So they'll be here next year, says the Beeman. Here is the wagon filled up to the brim with bottles of honey collected by him and brought to the house by the Beeman. Here are the muffins all warm and delicious and dripping with honey on Grandma's best dishes. I'm glad that my grandpa's the Beeman. Bees. Honeybees belong to the insect family. They have 6 legs, 3 body parts, and 2 pairs of wings, 2 antennae, and 2 compound eyes that let them see in all directions. A honeybee begins as an egg placed in a tiny cell by the queen. The egg hatches into a worm-like creature called a larva. The larva changes to a pupa, and hidden inside the tiny cell, the pupa turns into a honeybee. When it hatches, the bee is fully grown and ready to be a member of the colony. It takes about 3 weeks to go from an egg to a honeybee. Honeybees live in large groups called colonies. A colony of honeybees has 1 queen, several hundred drones, and tens of thousands of workers. Drone bees are male bees. They have huge black eyes and plump bodies. They don't work inside the hive or collect nectar and pollen. They mate with a queen. The queen bee has a slender body and is longer than the other bees. She is also the mother of them all. Her job is to lay eggs. In spring's busy season, she lays between 1,000 and 2,000 eggs every day. Worker bees are female and they have many different jobs. Sometimes they feed the larva and tidy up the hive, or they create wax and use it to make new cells. Sometimes they groom the queen and give her a rich protein food called royal jelly, or they protect the hive from enemies by standing guard at the entrance. Sometimes they leave the hive to gather nectar, pollen, or water. Their job depends on what the colony needs them to do. Hope you've learned a little bit about bees today. Make sure when you're outside that you don't kill the honeybees because they're very important.